Welcome, listeners, to WRKC at King's College. This is episode 3 of Monarchs at the Movies. This is Amir Kazemi, film critic at The Crown.
And this is Christopher Boucher, entertainment manager at The Crown. So this week we decided, since it's Black History Month, we'd be looking into a dive of sort of African-American centered movies.
Yeah,
more with black leading cast members and sort of
filmmakers
and how they've influenced movie
Hollywood
making
as a whole. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're going to start out with probably what people would probably know immediately in the past few years. Black Panther from 2018, one of my personal favorite movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's directed by Ryan Coogler, whose previous films include The Fruitafe Station and Creed. So, honestly, it's a really great movie. And I'm not just saying that just because I like superhero movies in general, but it was really authentic in its message, and it didn't really shy away. Because a lot of Marvel movies, a lot of their protagonists tend to lean in towards the more sarcastic, kind of quippy kind of
Like
sense.
Guardians and
Yeah,
Ant-Man and stuff. Yeah.
and I enjoy that, but when you see it time after time, it gets a little repetitive. But with Black Panther, I didn't really get that vibe off of T'Challa. He was pretty stoic throughout the whole movie. He was very emotional. You could see the character development on screen, and you really felt for him and like the people of Wakanda.
So leading up to the release of this movie, I was very afraid because of the political atmosphere surrounding it. I was skeptical going in, like many of us were, but I was afraid because of all the stuff that people were saying. And of course they were saying all these things before the movie even came out and before they knew anything about the plot. So when I went into this film, because of that level of skepticism, I really enjoyed it. It wasn't a perfect film, in my opinion, by any means, but it was enjoyable. I liked when I say politics, I mean the politics within the film between the characters. And I feel like it talked about this struggle talked about racial struggle in a very clean and level-handed way. It wasn't trying to shove it down your throat.
Yeah, it didn't beat you over the head with the message.
It told it very well within the story, and that made it a good film for me.
Yeah, it didn't double down on its meaning too much, because I feel like if it did, a lot of people, probably mostly white, would probably have been like, "Oh, it's about racism and all that kind of stuff." But no, while it did show those themes, it really showed the struggle of Wakanda and growing and expanding into the world and how it can help sort of the world as a whole.
We know how successful it was. I checked the stats. It made $1.347 billion, and that is insane, considering the fact that, for me at least, and I don't know if this is for most people, but I did not know about the comic book character Black Panther before the couple years leading up to this movie. Of course, he was in Civil War, right?
He was in Civil War.
He was in Civil War, but before that, I had no idea who he was. And this, although a comic book character, opened my eyes to a new realm in the Marvel Universe.
For me, I grew up with some of the comics of Black Panther, and I saw him on TV shows, and I thought he was a really cool character. They didn't exactly go into too much depth on the television shows. And then when this movie came out, I was just dazzled by how Wakanda looked, how the costume design, how all the people interacted. It was just so. It was a lot of world building in a movie where, well, in a film series that does a lot of world building, and it was just amazing, and I think it really deserved those Academy Awards that it got for, as far as production design and costume design.
Exactly. Yeah. It got score too, I believe.
I thought it was. That's also good because it had like during the movie it had like the incest, like drum beats, like African drum beats that sort of like underscored like all the music, which I thought was a good touch. And Ryan Coogler, the director, he's so good and he's so young. He's only like, I think 35 maybe.
I think you're right. That's about right.
Because he's young. He's younger than the lead actor Chadwick Boseman, who's trailing in on his mid 40s, which surprised me when I learned that fact. I was like, wow, you're already 30 and you've already created a $1 billion movie. Yeah. That is pretty good.
He, for his age and for how long he's been working, he's very good. But within the film, I would say there were some hallmarks of a director that's a little bit inexperienced. When it came with films like Fruitvale Station and Creed I haven't seen, but from what I know about Creed and Fruitvale Station I've seen, there wasn't any CGI there. So him going from more practical movies to a CGI heavy film, in some moments it showed. A little bit of spoiler warning if you haven't seen Black Panther. I feel like everyone's seen it at this point, so I'm sorry. The scene at the end where we have Michael B. Jordan's Killmonger going up against Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther, the CGI...
It's just so ridiculously bad.
It's not even, I would say, clay. It's like those rag dolls that we had when we were like 2 that... It's like the bendiness of the characters. And he could have potentially prevented that. He made the characters so well lit in that scene that you could see every single thing that was going on.
Because the final battle is during daytime, and then I didn't notice it the first time I watched the movie or the second, but when I looked on YouTube clips, I was like, oh man, this really is a lot worse than I originally saw, because
it's like the crash test dummy simulators.
It's like comparing like PlayStation 2 graphics to an updated PS4 system. It's so drastic. I was surprised, like, wow, they really let this onto the cutting room floor. They didn't decide to clean it up a little bit. I don't know if that was a budgeting issue or whether they spent a lot on their set and costume designs, or if they just...
I don't want to say it's a budgeting thing because
it probably wasn't.
They had $200 million.
It probably wasn't a budgeting thing, but they could have done a lot better at the end.
Yeah.
As far as CGI goes, and if we're gonna be, and because I don't want to seem too biased to this movie, I have to admit, it sort of plays on the Marvel tropes of, oh, the hero and the villain are basically the same. Power structure wise, and but
I one of the things that everyone points out, and I'm sorry to point it out again, but Killmonger was the type of villain that we understood. We understood where he was coming from. We understood why he was upset about what he was upset about. For the most part, outside of the killing, we felt for him.
Because throughout the whole movie, you see him as a young boy growing up in Oakland, California, and his father dies at the hands of the previous Black Panther. Spoiler alert, and he goes throughout life. He just has to adjust to this world of he's a kid who's African American, but he's also Wakandan in other people's eyes. And it just makes you, because I've had friends who saw the movie and they identified with this, like how you could be American and you can also be another ethnicity, and both sides might not see you the same way.
Yeah.
And that might be hard for me to see because I'm a white guy, but I felt that was a really good message, like underscoring and how the villain feels, because I also kind of felt for him. I felt sorry for him. Now, and I would almost kind of agree with his plans too, except he killed a lot of people, so that kind of what deterred me. But he was a very compelling villain because in the end he helped change T'Challa's mind on how Wakanda interacts with the world, and I thought that's also what brought it full circle.
The political viewpoint that you saw with Killmonger and T'Challa. With T'Challa, he had a more closed-off, nationalistic point of view when it came to his ruling in politics, and then with Killmonger, you had a more, I don't know if I want to say expansionistic or like more police of the.
I think it's more of just they have the power and they're not using it at all. They're just keeping themselves closed off.
And those political mindsets mirror what's going on in the U.S. So it's also seeing something like that done within the film made it that much better for me. Because it's not connecting it to any political parties in any way. It's saying that these exist and these characters in this film have these points of view. And it was, I thought it was interesting.
I'm glad you brought that up because there's a great line that T'Challa makes at the end of the movie where he's addressing the United Nations and he's saying we should come together as one tribe and we should build bridges towards each other. And I thought that was such a great line because that was probably a year after the 2016 election, and we all know how divided our country can be at times in terms of political parties, and I thought that was such a great line to be said because that could promote a lot of unity that this country kind of needs right now. And overall, like turning towards the actors like Chadwick Boseman and Michael B. Jordan, how they were absolutely fantastic, but also like Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia, Forrest Whitaker as Zuri, and even Martin Freeman, who's done Sherlock and who's been in Lord of the Rings as Everett Ross. I thought they were all fantastic.
Andy Serkis as Ulysses.
And Andy Serkis.
He was a bit of a crazier character in this than he was in, what was it?
The Age of Ultron.
Thank you. Which I enjoyed. I wasn't a big fan of Age of Ultron. I thought he was okay in that, but in this he was.
They really
fun.
They fleshed him out.
Yeah. People complain about his character, saying, "Oh, he just says random lines for the sake of it." I don't care. I enjoyed his character.
I think my favorite character in the movie was Shuri. She was really funny.
The sister?
Yeah, the sister. She designs all of Black Panther's weapons and his suit, and I thought she was really funny. Now, she was very integral to the plot and how they save Wakanda before they take their weapons out into the world. And overall, I kind of want to see more of her in future Marvel movies. I mean, we did in Infinity War and Endgame, but not to the degree that we saw in Black Panther.
Definitely be getting a Black Panther too.
Unfortunately, it won't be until 2022. So far away. So,
another significant film of recent times, it's kind of a comedy drama type film that it's not that big, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it won Best Adapted Screenplay. It was BlacKkKlansman, directed by Spike Lee. And the film had the weirdest plot you could think of, which 100% makes sense when you think about the Oscar that it won. It stars John David Washington and Adam Driver. And John David Washington, I watched throughout the film, and I was so unbelievably confused because I'm like, this guy sounds so familiar to me. I'm not sure why. And once I searched him up, he's Denzel Washington's son. And some of his mannerisms and some of the words he said sounded exactly like Denzel. And it finally, all the cogs came together and everything clicked. I'm like, oh, okay.
I mean, when you have a great actor for a father, I'm pretty sure a lot of it is going to rub off on you.
Yeah. So, have you seen it?
I have seen it, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting, because having an undercover black police officer as posing as a white man going undercover to the KKK, I thought that was...
And then Adam Driver's
as Adam Driver as like the actual guy who's going undercover physically.
And it was fun. It was also funny because Adam Driver's character was Jewish. So when when he goes to these meetings and the Klan members are saying horrible stuff about literally any other race, the way that he composes himself is amazing. The way that the dialogue with him, with John David Washington, it's hilarious.
It definitely had all the tropes that you would expect from a Spike Lee movie, and that's what made me love it a lot.
Yeah.
And then it got nominated for 6 Oscars
And won the one for adapted screenplay. It was for that. It was well deserved. I think Spike Lee was nominated for Best Director for that too, which I can understand. It was nominated for score, and I think a lot of people probably haven't seen the movie. So I
Really? I thought out of like a lot of 2018 movies, I thought that one might have actually gotten a lot more people behind seeing that one than a lot of the other ones that were on that, besides Black Panther.
Yeah.
Although, if I'm being honest, I can't remember too many of the
18.
All those 2018 movies that got nominated. But I do remember this one being one of the, I think, 4 that I did see. That I do remember seeing Black Klansman, mainly because it was such an
outlandish idea.
Not like outlandish, but more of just like so out there. Like, this seems,
and it's true, which is
it drew. I mean, it drew me in, and that's what I got.
So,
yeah. So, last week, as we did our movie recommendation, I will be doing our new recommendation for our next show. In honor of Black History Month, I thought a good movie to be seen that came out a few years ago, back in 2017, Get Out by Jordan Peele. It's a great, I wouldn't quite label it horror, but it's sort of like a thriller movie.
That also, I think that also won Best Original Screenplay.
And it won Best Director, too, as far as I can remember. And I remember seeing the movie, initially it coming out, and I was like, wow, Jordan Peele, I didn't know he was so good at directing horror.
Comedy Central.
Yeah, the Key and Peele artist is really good at horror. And as we've seen with Us and a lot of his upcoming movies and TV shows that he's now behind, I think he's going to be a very staple director in Hollywood for years to come. So if you haven't seen Get Out, please do, because we will go over it in our next episode.
So we're making this recommendation, so if you want to stop listening, because if you haven't seen Sicario, which is the recommendation from last week, we're going to talk about it. The beginning may not have spoilers, but we won't necessarily have a warning for when we switch over to spoilers. So Sicario is a film that came out in 2015. Sicario means hitman. in Spanish. I mentioned this last week. The director is Denis Villeneuve, my favorite director, and it's written by Taylor Sheridan, also my favorite writer. I also would want to mention that the cinematographer is the great Roger Deakins, which we know from the Oscar that he won for Blade Runner 2049 and this year's cinematography Oscar for 1917.
Oof.
So
he's got quite the book on him.
I honestly want to say he has over 10 nominations in addition to these 2 wins. So his fingerprint is on this film for sure. So for Taylor Sheridan, a lot of people may not know him. He has done, since Sicario, has written films such as Hell or High Water, which is about 2 bank robber brothers, which I'm not going to... With his films, I'll try not to talk too much about his other films, so if you haven't seen them, you can go watch them. Hell or High Water is about the 2 bank robber brothers. Wind River, one of my favorite films of his, it starts out about an 18-year-old Native American girl that's found frozen and dead in the snow in Wyoming, and it's on a reservation, and it's about how an FBI agent played by... Who's Scarlet Witch?
Elizabeth Olsen.
Thank you. Played by her, and then Jeremy Renner plays fish and wildlife guy who go after evidence trying to find out what happened to this girl. And it's a powerful story, as we find out by the end of the film, and this isn't necessarily spoilery, that there is no statistic on missing Native American women. And it's heartbreaking because we have... The director asked his crew, said, please go find out what the statistic is on missing Native American women. And they could find it for every other demographic but Native American. And that's heartbreaking.
Wow,
and
that is really sad.
And that's what they put as a title card at the end of the film. There is no significant statistic on it. And then in 2018, his sequel to Sicario, Sicario Day of the Soldado, came out. And that essentially dealt with the trauma and issues that come along with the drug trade and terrorism, and how it takes a toll on the victims, obviously, and victims specifically that we see in this film are children. And so the story of Sicario is about this FBI agent played by Emily Blunt, who is essentially recruited by Josh Brolin's character, Matt Graver, who's a CIA Special Activities Division officer, who wants her to essentially be able to go after a Mexican drug lord, essentially. And it, again, since we're dealing with Taylor Sheridan, it's a very real problem that we're seeing. It's dealing with drugs in the country and how the CIA, the FBI, DEA is trying to stop the flow of drugs into the country. And it's, by the end of the film, spoiler alert, it shows how they want to get rid of one of the cartels, so there's only one, so they can deal with that one cartel. If they have that one source of illegal drugs that comes into the country, it's easier for them to control than the two, which is a sad fact because the goal should always be to eradicate it completely.
Stop everything.
But it has become so much of an issue that that's what they have to resort to. And it's sad that that's the case. It's truly saddening. They refer to it as them
controlling like the market. And
exactly,
stuff like
controlling
that.
the market, reverting back to the era of the Medellin cartel, which was the cartel that Pablo Escobar ran. And we know that illegal drugs is a big issue in the country, and how damaging it is to people around us, and having this shown to us and told to us that it's not necessarily a true story, but the fact that
it was realistic.
Yeah.
That's what we get with Emily Blunt's character, because I think we go in with her point of view into the movie, and then by the end of it,
it's the innocent point of view.
We're surprised. I guess maybe that's not it. Maybe it's we come out a little shocked, but not all that surprised. Mm-hmm. Because we know this happens in our country, and we could reasonably believe that this would happen.
Yeah. I failed to mention that we get an amazing performance from Benicio del Toro. Oh, I loved him before this, but when I saw this, I'm like, he's one of my favorite actors now. He plays Benicio del Toro's character, Alejandro, was a former prosecutor in Juarez, and the cartel that he goes after, along with Josh Brolin's character, has killed his wife and daughter. And when we find out this information, it's heartbreaking because of the way he says it's been done. And then he's a prosecutor, essentially, turned Sicario, turned hitman. And it's again saddening. And when we see the characters in Juarez, we truly see the horrific nature of what the illegal drug trade does to people. And it's, again, I've said this 30 times already, heartbreaking. I don't have words for the way that it destroys communities, and in terms of the usage and in terms of the trafficking itself, what it causes, the destruction along the path that it causes.
And I think that's what he does such a great job in this movie, of like he creates these powerful images, like in the beginning of the movie where Emily Blunt's character, she's in the house and she finds all the mutilated bodies. Yeah. Or in the end, where, spoiler, Benedict del Toro's character, he sort of enacts his vengeance against the drug lord's family, and he takes them all out. And I was like a little shocked at first, as I thought maybe character development, maybe he'll just kill him, but no, he took out his family before he even
in front of him.
Yeah, and I was like,
him to feel the same
I was like, wow, that's really cold-blooded. And then I thought, oh, well, that's probably what revenge does to you. And having those like powerful images like portrayed right in front of you is just so good.
A lot of some things that we saw with Denis Villeneuve's directing is throughout the film we have characters that are innocent, like Emily Blunt's Kate Macer. And one of the things he does, and this is such a small detail and so intricate, her character starts out wearing a blue shirt, just a blue t-shirt, and then throughout the film, as she starts finding out more and more about what Josh Brolin and Del Toro's characters are doing, her shirt becomes a bluish gray. It starts slowly becoming grayer and grayer until by the end, when Del Toro's character forces her to sign. There's some form that he forces her to sign that essentially says that everything that the CIA did through her was legal, done legally, and by then her shirt's completely gray. And once I said this earlier, it shows it's an amazing way to show her loss of innocence. It's just when I realized that upon my second or third viewing, I don't remember. I'm like, wow, that's so small, such a small detail that I like. If I didn't give it much thought, I wouldn't have noticed. But the work put into this film was amazing. We also, in a way, we see this with Del Toro's character too. At the beginning, he's in like a sand tan suit, and throughout the film, once he starts revealing himself, he starts wearing darker and darker.
Mm-hmm. Because I remember at the beginning of the movie, I thought, oh, seems pretty
chill,
pretty like a chill guy. And then by the end, when you see his execution, you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
So this is why they call him the Sicario.
Yeah. It's with Sheridan, he makes films that people might find a little bit controversial at the least. And I can see it, but they're films about real issues that we either see around us or may not see. And this stuff like this, opening our eyes to, again, it's not a true story, but
it can be.
Exactly.
I think he's trying to not really open our eyes, but more of call us back, because we do tend to ignore these kinds of stories, or we just shrug them off. Like every time we hear about human trafficking,
it's hard. It's hard
about human trafficking or drug dealing or anything involving like corruption. We tend to be shocked, then we get over it, and then it gradually just fades from our minds. But the way he processes the images in our mind, it's sort of like, no, you can't look away. This happens every day.
One of the things that this is 100% a movie that Denis Villeneuve would choose. You have the idea of right and wrong. So with Emily Blunt's character, we more or less see the film through her point of view. Is it right that Josh Brolin and Del Toro did this? Legally, no, it's not right. But it makes us think as a viewer, should they have done it? Is it right? Is it right to do that?
Is it right to control drug trade, to only market it to one specific cartel?
Yeah.
Or is it just they have to eradicate them all, but it might not be as effective?
Yeah. So I like the fact that it's gray area. It makes you try to make difficult decisions on these truths. So throughout, since the film has come out, and surprisingly, wow, it's been 5 years, I've given this film a lot of thought. It might honestly be in my top 10. It's really good.
I would agree. It's a very good movie. It took me at least one or two viewings to fully get the message to sink in, but
of course, it's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
No. If it makes me come back to want to watch it again, then it already has done something right.
Yeah. So, I hope you guys saw it earlier, but if you haven't and you're still listening and heard the spoilers, even then, I still think
there's a lot of content that I think you would enjoy.
Yeah. A lot of people just need some spoiled for them to be able to, understand that, oh, maybe I'd like this film. So now, if you're one of those people, please check it out. It's great.
Okay. Well, as a reminder, our next movie recommendation will be Get Out 2017 by Jordan Peele. And tune in to us next time. This is Chris Boucher, entertainment manager of The Crown.
And this is Amir Kazemi, film critic at The Crown. We will see you next time.